Well, Alberta's obvious frustration with pipeline paralysis and economic stagnation and all those huge layoffs has some observers suggesting he'll lift the political strategy from Quebec if he wins the election on Tuesday night. Let's tap into someone who gets Alberta-Quebec politics inside and out. Former NDP leader Tom Mulcair joined us from Montreal.
Right on.
Tom, you know, referendum on equalization, this us versus the rest of Canada approach, seething alienation. Sound familiar to you as a Quebecer?
Yeah, I've heard some of that before. The other thing that I learned in looking at Jason Kenney's Twitter feed, of course, is that he's in fact running against Justin Trudeau, because there are very few references to Rachel Notley, but I think every other tweet mentions Justin Trudeau, whether it's banning this pipeline or tanker traffic. It's all Trudeau all the time. So I guess it's quite easy for Mr. Kenney to run his campaign, but I think that Albertans are going to be voting about a fight between him and Rachel Notley, so it'll be interesting to see what he's got to say about her.
Well, but it's somewhat interesting. There is an awful lot of sense of alienation, if not separation, in Alberta, and you hear a lot like Alberta's lost 130,000 jobs in the last year, yet Trudeau fights this stubborn battle to keep 3,000 SNC-Lavalin jobs in Quebec. So do you understand why it's perceived as a double standard in Alberta?
You bet. And I can understand it completely. But I also know that Mr. Kenney's got to realize that if and when he does win his election, he's going to wind up giving Justin Trudeau a great excuse for not having met his obligations under the Paris Accord, for example, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And there's no question, Don. You know, I have family, as you know, in Calgary, in Alberta, who have been working in the oil patch, and it's a very tough time. A lot of people have lost their jobs. It's been a horrible neglect of Alberta from the federal government. And you're right. I mean, it depends on where you're from, but no question that Albertans feel that they haven't gotten a fair shake right now. And Mr. Kenney is playing right to that sentiment.
Let's go back in your ancient history. I know probably a lot of our viewers might have forgotten this, but there was an academic named Stephen Harper who wrote this so-called firewall letter, and he said Alberta should raise the drawbridge along its borders, keep control in areas of constitutional jurisdiction in Alberta, and forget everything else. Is that a winning idea in a province that's feeling unappreciated by everyone else?
Well, it is a winning idea if that's all you want to do, but if you realize that being connected to the rest of the country is necessary if you do indeed want to get more access to other markets with the product that you're making, which is, of course, you know, petroleum and natural gas, then you've got to work with the other provinces and whatever government's going to be in Ottawa. Because even if Andrew Scheer were to win the next federal general election in October, there's no question in my mind, Don, that he'd still have to work with British Columbia and its current government there, because I don't see the army coming in and forcing the building of a pipeline. So this is still a complicated country. I can tell you, with regard to pipeline politics, my refusal to come out foursquare against the Energy East pipeline cost me dearly in Quebec, but I kept saying, no, it deserves to be analyzed and on its merits. And that's the only way to do these things. What's missing, of course, for those of us who think that the environment in general and climate change in particular are in fact really important issues, is that Canada has no plan. That was told to us last week by Julie Gelfand, who's our Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development, that we have no plan to meet our international obligations. So until we learn that we have to start with that result, and then we can build whatever means we have to build to get our products to market within that budget, but we're not there at all. Now, if you listen to Rachel Notley, she'll try to convince you that she's got a plan to bend the curve. Mr. Trudeau tries to repeat that line, saying, no, we're going to meet all of those obligations if only you leave Rachel Notley there. Well, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And again, unwittingly, of course, Jason Kenney is giving Justin Trudeau an out with all of the progressives across Canada who are actually hoping that instead of talking about it, Canada would finally get something done on climate change.
What do you think of Kenney saying the first item of business in his government, if he wins Tuesday, is basically starting to turn down the taps through the pipelines, the existing pipelines to BC, and bashing Quebec for not allowing pipelines through there? I mean, how does the winner of the next federal election deal with that kind of a provincial premier?
I think that Jason Kenney is doing what populists like to do a few days out from an election, get their base riled up, make sure that they're feeling good and angry, so that instead of sitting at home and waiting for the announced or at least anticipated result, that they actually bothered to go out and vote. And I think that that's what this is all about. Mr. Kenney does have, from all indications, a sizable lead, but he knows that in politics things can change rapidly, and he's been fighting very hard to get people out to the advance polls so that the ballot box will actually be full of votes for his United Conservative Party. And we'll see whether it's there for him on Election Day. Again, all the indications are that it will be.
Right. Well, one-term wonder for Rachel Notley. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's going to be very surprising if all of the polls are that wrong. She has put up a spirited fight. She has delivered on some of her key promises, has disappointed on others, and we'll see whether it's there for her at Election Day. But I think that the numbers are so solidly in Mr. Kenney's favor that barring some very unforeseen circumstance, the result is pretty well preordained.
All right. Tom Mulcair, thanks for your insight as always. Appreciate it.
All the best.